Let me set the scene. A man dies. Not heroically, he gets shoved in front of a Tokyo train by an employee he just fired because nothing tops off a productive day of layoffs quite like becoming a hood ornament. And in his final dwindling seconds, a god offers him a hand. He refuses to call it God. He calls it Being X, the way you'd label a tax form. Okay, so Being X, who turns out to be the pettiest entity in any pantheon, decides the perfect punishment is to reincarnate this cold-blooded HR ghoul as a tiny blonde orphan girl and drop her into a continent that's essentially World War I cosplaying as a fantasy anime. The plan: grind her down until she believes. The result: she becomes the most ruthlessly effective war criminal the front has ever seen. This is Saga of Tanya the Evil, and I promise you, it's so much funnier and so much darker than the sentence had any right to be. Let's go to war. We don't open at the beginning because Tanya the Evil has no interest in your comfort. We open in the churned mud of the Rhine, where the Empire and the Francois Republic have settled into the kind of trench warfare that turns men into statistics. Commanding the Imperial mages overhead is a child, a small golden-haired girl with the voice of a kindergarten recital and the eyes of an actuary calculating your funeral costs. This is our introduction to the legend the enemy calls the Devil of the Rhine, and the Premier's entire job is to make sure you feel the gap between how she looks and what she is. It does this through a masterclass in dread. A subordinate cracks under fire, a grown man twice her size, breaking the way people actually break when artillery is rearranging the sky. Tanya doesn't console him. She produces military regulations like a conjurer producing a blade, reads him his rights, and arranges his death with the brisk courtesy of someone wrapping a meeting up on time. No raised voice, no villain monologue, just paperwork with a body count. By the time the smoke clears, you understand everything. This is a person who studied the rulebook so thoroughly she can kill you legally and feel absolutely nothing. What makes the opener sing is the tonal whiplash. One beat it's grim, blood and mud wall cinema. The next is the blackest comedy on television, mining laughs from the simple horror of a 9-year-old being better at organised violence than every adult in frame. The animation leans all the way in. The mages streak across the heavens like tracer rounds, magic rendered not as sparkly nonsense, but as ballistics with a grudge. It's the rare premise that thrusts visuals and silence to carry the load, never once pausing to explain the gimmick it's selling you. Crucially though, the episode withholds the why. We don't yet know who this girl really is, what's screaming inside that small skull, or why she fights as though survival were a personal vendetta. We just know she terrifies everyone. The war has no horizon, and somebody decided to make the most dangerous soldier on the continent look like a porcelain doll. It's a cold open that works like a dare. You came for a cute army girl? Stay and meet the monster wearing her face. So, who is she? Episode 2 yanks the rug out and lands us in present-day Tokyo, inside the life of a man so devoid of warmth, he makes the Rhine trenches look cozy. He's a salaryman, a HR executive, and we meet him doing the one thing he's genuinely brilliant at, firing someone with the emotional investment of a vending machine. He recites efficiency, productivity, the cold arithmetic of capitalism, and he's exceptional at it, which is the joke and the tragedy folded into a single suit. Then, the employee he dismissed returns to offer his feedback by shoving him in front of an oncoming train. And here the show reveals its actual engine. Time freezes. The faces of the bystanders on the platform swivel toward him in eerie unison, and a voice speaks, claiming to be God. Our salaryman, ever the rationalist, refuses the title outright. To him, this is merely an unexplained phenomenon, a data anomaly, an entity he coolly files under Being X. He then lectures a deity on the sociology of faith, arguing that humans only pray because modern life is comfortable enough to leave room for it, and that under real hardship, belief simply evaporates. Being X, who plainly did not descend to be condescended to, takes this personally. The punishment is elegant in its cruelty, rebirth, but into a world stripped of the comfortable modernity that lets atheism flourish. A war-torn continent, a body that's weak, poor, female, and very, very young. The wager is that misery will finally bring this man to his knees. It's spite on a biblical scale, and the show plays the cosmic pettiness completely straight, which is somehow what makes it land. What I admire about this episode is that it refuses to soften him. There's no redemption arc idling in the wings, no secret heart of gold waiting to be discovered. Tanya is, by design, a worldview given flesh, the conviction that everything, including survival and other people, is a resource to be optimized. The reincarnation isn't a hero's call to adventure, it's a grudge match between a bureaucrat and a god, and the rest of the series is just both parties refusing to blink. It's the rare origin chapter that leaves you faintly worried about how much you're laughing. You understand the monster now. You also understand it was never going to apologize. Reincarnated, orphaned, and aggressively pragmatic, baby Tanya does the math and concludes the military is the only ladder out of poverty available to a gifted mage. So she enlists absurdly young and gets shipped to the frozen Nordon front to fight the Legadonia Entente alliance. Her plan is simple and deeply relatable. Rack up just enough decorations to earn a cushy posting far behind the lines where the gravest threat is a paper cut. The universe, naturally, has notes. The title, God Wills It, is the whole episode's punchline, and it's vicious. Sent up as a forward artillery observer, Tanya gets cornered in a scenario engineered to be unsurvivable. Being X stacks the deck, and in the precise moment she should simply die, the deity offers a bargain dressed as salvation. The experimental computation orb she's testing will spare her life, but only if she prays. Genuinely prays though, and means it. So we get the image that defines the series. A furious little girl shrieking praise to a god she loathes, channeling holy power through clenched teeth, weaponizing devotion she doesn't feel because the alternative is a shallow grave. The magic detonates, the enemy doesn't survive it, and the Empire, watching, draws exactly the wrong conclusion. What a faithful, inspiring young soldier. They have no idea she's spitting venom at heaven the entire time. This is the show working at peak irony. The system rewards her for the one thing she's done under protest. Her hatred reads as zeal. Her survival instincts read as heroism. Every step she takes to flee the front digs the pit deeper, because competence is a trap. The better you are at war, the more war they hand you. It's a feedback loop so tidy, it could have been engineered by a sadist, and arguably it was, wasn't it? The episode also sharpens the central rivalry into something genuinely comic. Being X isn't a looming Dark Lord, he's an unsufferable cosmic micromanager who keeps prodding his employee until she snaps. And Tanya's response to literal divine intervention isn't awe, it's the indignation of someone whose commute keeps getting sabotaged. By the end you're laughing and uneasy in equal measure, which is roughly the program's resting heart rate. God wants her on her knees, she'd rather file a complaint. After the Northern campaign chews her up and spits her out, Tanya finally gets the thing she's been scheming for, a transfer away from the killing. Episode 4 pulls her off the front and into the War College, and for one glorious stretch, Saga of Tanya the Evil becomes the world's grimmest school anime. Lectures, strategy seminars, the bureaucratic comedy of a tiny veteran outthinking grown officers who've never heard a shell land in anger. This is the breather episode, and it's smarter than most shows' climaxes. Watching Tanya operate in a classroom is its own kind of thriller, because her mind runs on pure cost-benefit calculus and she treats every exchange as a negotiation. She impresses her instructors not by being a prodigy in the inspiring sense, but by being mercilessly correct, proposing strategies so coldly logical that they make seasoned generals shift in their chairs. When she dissects how the Empire ought to fight a multi-front war, she's effectively drafting a thesis on winning with the fewest lives spent, and the chilling part is that she's actually right. Of course, the joke is that her every brilliant move serves the least heroic goal imaginable. She isn't trying to save the nation, she's trying to look indispensable in a way that buys her a desk, a pension, and a lifelong nowhere near a battlefield. The tragedy she can't perceive is that excellence is precisely what keeps promoting her toward the danger she's sprinting away from. The episode also widens the lens on the world itself. The geopolitics tighten, the map of rival nations clarifies, and you begin to feel the Empire's predicament. A powerful country ringed by enemies, paranoid, and increasingly willing to do appalling things to stay ahead. It's history-class storytelling, but the show keeps the dry material tense by filtering it through one girl's relentless self-interest. Even the lightest beats carry a low thrum of menace, because you can feel the war idling just past the campus gates. There are no grand explosions here, and that's the point. It's a chess interlude, the low hum of a machine recalibrating before it grinds back into motion. You can almost feel Tanya relax, just slightly, into the safety of a lecture hall, which, in a show like this, is the surest possible sign that the front is about to come calling again. The classroom idol ends the way good things always end for Tanya, with a promotion she didn't want and a mission that she just can't refuse. Tasked with building an elite aerial mage battalion from nothing, the unit that will become the famous 203rd, she approaches recruitment with the warmth of a wood chipper. Episode 5 is where the show's pitch-black humour finds its purest target, the training montage as a war crime against volunteers. The selection test is the centerpiece, and it's magnificently cruel. Tanya designs trials so punishing that prospective mages drop out, vomit, or quietly interrogate every life decision that led them here, all while she observes with the detachment of a scientist watching mold spread on bread. Her reasoning is, as ever, airtight and horrifying. She'd rather command a handful of the unbreakable than a crowd of the merely brave. The applicants believe they've signed up for glory, but they've actually enrolled in the worst summer camp in recorded history, supervised by a child who treats their suffering as a useful sieve. It's hazing elevated to an art form, and the cruelty is the entire curriculum. Running alongside it is the episode's other engine, the experimental computation orb, the Type 95, dreamt up by the Empire's most enthusiastically unhinged engineer. The thing is a marvel and a menace at once, ferociously powerful, prone to frying its user's mind, and stabilized only by, of all possible ingredients, faith. When Tanya test flies it, the device essentially hijacks her into rapturous prayer, turning the open sky into a cathedral and her into its screaming choir. She despises every second. It functions flawlessly. Being X is somewhere delighted. The brilliance of the episode is how it wields comedy and dread without diluting either. You laugh at the recruit's misery and the mad engineer's glee, then catch yourself realizing you're watching the assembly of a weapon. Both the battalion and the orb are instruments built to make killing more efficient, with Tanya as the cold intelligence wiring them together. By the time the 203rd takes shape, the show's dropped any pretense that this is anyone's underdog story. This is hammer forgery, and the hammer is grinning. Strap in. The thing she just built is about to be pointed at someone. If you ever needed proof that war can be terrifying and idiotic in the same breath, episode 6 is your exhibit. Fresh off forging her battalion, Tanya gets her first proper deployment when a neighboring nation, the gloriously overconfident Dacian, decides this is the ideal moment to invade the Empire, marching across the border with cavalry, antique rifles, and the strategic foresight of a toddler reaching for a hot stove. What follows is one of the most lopsided beatdowns the genre has ever animated, and the show knows precisely how funny that is. The Dacian army arrives expecting a fair fight. Tanya's mages arrive expecting target practice. The 203rd descends like a weather event, and the invasion collapses into a rout so absolute it loops back around from horrifying to absurd. There's a queasy comedy in watching an entire offensive evaporate because one side brought magic-powered artillery and the other brought enthusiasm. The 203rd doesn't so much fight the Dacians as audit them out of existence, swatting an entire army from the sky with the bored thoroughness of someone clearing junk mail from an inbox. But the title isn't Dawn of Madness for nothing, and this is where the chapter earns its keep. The Dacian humiliation isn't a triumph, it's a tremor. Other nations are watching. The Empire's overwhelming victories don't make it safe, they make it a target. A too strong neighbor everyone else now has the reason to fear and surround. Every fight Tanya wins to protect herself is quietly enlarging the broader war, making it uglier and more inescapable. The madness of the title is the logic of escalation itself, the way crushing winds manufacture the next worst conflict. Tanya, of course, registers none of this as moral weight. To her, the Dacian campaign is a line on a resume, a clean and efficient operation that should, by all rights, get her noticed and rewarded with safety. But the audience can see the snare that she can't. Every demonstration of her lethality merely raises her value to a military that will never ever let an asset like her retire. The episode lands its laughs, then lets the smile curdle in your mouth. We came for a curb stomp. We leave understanding the curb stomp was a recruiting poster for the apocalypse. Funny how a slaughter can also be a beginning. Episode 7 slows down to do something the series usually holds at arm's length. It lets us feel the human cost. The man at its center is Colonel Anson Su of the Entente Alliance, an officer we first glimpsed back in the Nordon skies, now stepping fully into focus. Before the battle, we watch him bid farewell to his family, his wife, his daughter, as he heads off to defend his country from the imperial war machine that Tanya happens to embody. It's a tender, ordinary scene of a father leaving home, and the show plants it deliberately, the way you'd plant a flower you fully intend to step on. Then comes the clash at the ford, a gorgeous and brutal piece of aerial combat. The Entente mages make a desperate stand. Tanya's battalion presses with mechanical precision, and in the chaos, Tanya engages Su directly. He fights the ferocity of a man defending everything he loves. She fights with the serenity of someone balancing an equation. The outcome is never truly in doubt, is it? She runs him through with a bayonet and lets him fall into the sea, and strips the rifle off his body like loose change, never once noticing the initials engraved on it. A gift from the very daughter we just watched him kiss goodbye. The choreography is genuinely beautiful, all sweeping arcs and tracer bright spellfire, which only sharpens how ugly the result underneath it really is. What elevates the episode is the framing. We were just shown this man as a husband and a father, Now we watch him fall to a child who feels nothing about it. The series rarely lets you mourn its casualties. Here it forces you to, and the contrast is actually devastating. Tanya doesn't gloat, doesn't even pause. To her it was a successful engagement. To us, it was a household destroyed, and the camera lingers just long enough to make certain that we feel the difference. It's also the episode that quietly loads the gun for everything still to come, and I mean that almost literally. That daughter saying goodbye to her father isn't a throwaway shot, and neither is the engraved rifle now riding on Tanya's hip. Grief like that doesn't vanish. It metastasizes. It goes hunting for a name to blame. The show is too disciplined to underline it, but the seed is unmistakable. Somewhere out there, a child is learning to hate the devil of the Rhine, and hatred keeps long records. Once comedy is completely aside, what remains is colder and sadder. A reminder that Tanya's tidy victories are written in other people's blood, and that ledgers eventually get balanced. Some debts don't disappear, they wait. If you've ever been waiting for the episode that makes the title Saga of Tanya the Evil feel less like a wink and more like an accusation, here it is. The Francois Republic, looking to bleed the empire from within, backs an armed uprising in the occupied city of Aren, smuggling in mages and weapons so the civilian population rises against its imperial occupiers. It is messy, ugly insurgent warfare, the kind with no clean front line and no clean conscience, and the empire dispatches Tanya to put it down. What she does with that assignment is the darkest thing she does in the entire run, and the show presents it without flinching. Rather than wade into a grinding house-to-house bloodbath that would cost her precious soldiers, Tanya reaches for the rulebook again, and this time it's monstrous. She issues a formal warning ordering every civilian to evacuate, then declares that anyone who remains is, by the strict letter of international law, a combatant. Having manufactured her legal pretext with chilling care, she levels the city. The horror of the sequence isn't rage, is procedure. Tanya commits an atrocity, not in a fury, but as the logical solution to an optimization problem. Minimize friendly losses, neutralize the threat, remain technically within the law she's read more carefully than the people who wrote it. She isn't a slavering villain. She's something worse, actually. A competent one who can justify the whole thing on paper. That's the nightmare the episode hands you. Not a beast you can fear cleanly, but a clerk with a steady conscience and an exhaustive grasp of the fine print. And the series refuses to let her off the hook or to wallow in the carnage. It simply shows you the math, then the rubble, and trusts you to feel ill. This is the moment the show's central irony turns its edge on the audience. We've spent episodes laughing alongside a charming, clever protagonist, and now we're staring at the body count that charm and cleverness produce when there's no conscious steering them. There's no punchline waiting at the bottom of this one. The comedy goes silent, the way a room goes silent when someone finally says the quiet thing out aloud. What's left is a calm, awful clarity. The devil of the Rhine earned the name. After the ashes of Aren, Episode 9 exhales, not in relief, but in the grim regrouping of a war about to grow much larger. The immediate insurgency is crushed, yet the Francois Republic is far from finished. It's massing for a major offensive, and the Empire knows it. So the chapter becomes one of logistics, intelligence, and the unglamorous machinery that quietly decides who lives, the part of war that never makes the highlight reel but wins or loses everything. Tanya, ever the careerist, threads this stretch by reconnecting with old acquaintances from the War College and angling, as always, for the most survivable posting on offer. A reunion with a fellow officer named Uge gives the show room to humanize the Empire's apparatus a little. These are real people inside a real bureaucracy trying to make sense of orders from above, and Tanya works them like a player who's already read the endgame. Her gift for reading institutions proves every bit as lethal as her gift for reading targets. She grasps that a war is won as much in supply depots and staff meetings as it is in the open sky. The episode's strength is atmospheric. You can feel the front lines tightening, the Republic gathering its strength, the sense that the relative skirmishing of the early war is giving way to something with real teeth. It's the held breath before a sprint, and the show uses the lull to remind you of the scale bearing down. The Empire is strong, yes, but it's also surrounded, overextended, and increasingly dependent on monsters like Tanya to hold the line. The dramatic irony hums beneath every scene. The better she performs, the more indispensable and the more exposed she becomes. There's a creeping dread beneath the planning room calm. Every preparation is a confession that the next phase will be bloodier than the last. Tanya readies herself with her usual cold thoroughness, but even she can sense the storm massing on the horizon, and for once, the thing she's calculating against may be too big to optimize her way out of. The board is set, the pieces are sliding into position, and somewhere across the lines, an enemy is loading everything it has into a single decisive push. The quiet is about to end. Episode 10 drops its bombshell early. Colonel Su, the father we watched Tanya kill and dump into the sea, is actually alive, recovered, transported aboard an allied kingdom vessel, and here's the twist that recolors the entire rivalry remade. Being X, never one to waste a chance to torment his least favorite employee, has reached into Su's grief and rage and granted him power, transforming a broken officer into a holy berserker with a single purpose burning behind his eyes: destroy the devil of the Rhine. Meanwhile, the Republic launches the offensive everyone's been bracing for, hurling its strength against the Imperial line in a bid to crack the war wide open. The episode juggles both threads with real momentum, the broad strategic crisis of a major enemy push, and the personal, almost mythic menace of a vengeance-fueled mage who's been touched by a god specifically to ruin Tanya's afternoon. This is where the series' supernatural stakes finally lock into focus. Until now, Being X has been a nagging cosmic presence, voice and shove. Now, he's escalated to outright sabotage, weaponizing a grieving man into a guided missile aimed squarely at Tanya. It reframes everything. This was never simply a war between nations for her. It's a war between one stubborn atheist and a deity who keeps raising the price of her defiance. Su isn't merely an enemy, he's a message. Kneel, or I keep sending these. It's a sharp pivot because it quietly upgrades an ordinary war drama into a personal vendetta with cosmic stakes, where the frontline is merely the venue Being X happened to have booked. Tanya's reaction, gloriously, is not fear, but indignation. She's less frightened of the empowered colonel than she's affronted that her celestial tormentor has found yet another avenue to interfere with her quiet pursuit of safety. The sheer audacity of God, essentially, sabotaging her quarterly targets. The episode tightens like a fist, all of its threads dragging toward an inevitable collision. The Republic is pushing, the battalion is stretched thin, and bearing down on Tanya is a man with every earthly reason, and one very persistent unearthly one, to want her death. The path to victory, it turns out, runs directly through a reckoning, and it's nearly here. Cornered, outnumbered, and running low on everything, the depleted 203rd makes the only choice Tanya respects. Instead of retreating, they attack. Episode 11 is the series at its most kinetic, a desperate offensive flung against a numerically superior enemy, the battalion threading impossible odds because their commander has decided boldness is simply the most efficient flavor of survival. It's the closest the season comes to a conventional climax, and the show earns it by making the recklessness feel like cold arithmetic rather than bravado. Waiting in the storm is Su, the resurrected colonel, now a blazing instrument of divine vengeance. Their duel is the emotional and physical summit of the season, two fighters running on opposite engines colliding in open air. She burns with grief and borrows holy fire, fighting for the family stolen from him, screaming for the god that remade him. Tanya fights the way she always fights. Cold, exact, unsentimental. It's love and hatred against pure calculation, and the show makes you feel the full weight of both. The animation rises to meet the moment, every collision rendered with a ferocity the series normally keeps holstered, as if even the camera understands this one matter. What makes the sequence land is that, for a moment, the math turns genuinely hard. Su's God-given power presses Tanya to her absolute limit, forcing her to spend everything, to lean on the very orb that channels the deity she despises, to scream the prayer she hates, just to keep drawing breath. There's a bitter poetry in it. To defeat the man Being X empowered, she must wield the gift Being X cursed her with. The cosmic tormentor wins either way, and she knows it. In the end, she puts Su down for good, but the victory is hollow and quiet. There's no triumph in her expression, only the grim bookkeeping of a problem solved. And the series, to its great credit, lets death mean something. This was a father, undone twice, who only ever wanted to go home. His war is finally over. His daughter's, though we don't glimpse her here, is just beginning. The battlefield goes still, the borrowed light in Su's eyes goes out, and far away, a god quietly adds another tally to a debt a small girl will spend the rest of her life refusing to pay. A grave is closed, a grudge is not. The season finale is fittingly a lesson in why winning a battle isn't the same as winning a war, and why victory in this show always arrives wearing air quotes. With the Republic's offensive shattered, the 203rd pulls off the kind of audacious maneuver that legends are built on, a deep strike that outflanks the enemy, caves in their line, and sends the Francois war effort into freefall. On paper, it's a stunning triumph. The Empire celebrates, a truce edges onto the table. For one shining beat, it looks as though the fighting might actually stop. It doesn't, of course, because nothing in this universe is permitted to be that clean. The Republic's leadership refuses to surrender outright. Instead, the government flees to form a resistance in exile, vowing to fight on from the shadows. The Empire's grand victory has merely scattered its enemy, not ended it, and worse, the nation's swelling dominance is making the rest of the world nervous. The Commonwealth watches. The vast federation to the east stirs in its sleep. Every triumph the Empire stacks up becomes another reason for everyone else to band together against it. Tanya, who engineered the winning blow, reads the situation with perfect clarity and zero comfort. She understands what the brass refuses to admit. This isn't the end of the war, it's the trailer for a much bigger one. Her dream of a safe rear echelon retirement recedes even as her medals accumulate, because now she's just too valuable, too famous, and too gifted at the one job she spent the entire series trying to escape. Competence remains the cruelest trap of all. It's the season's thesis stated without flinching. In this world, being good at war is a life sentence, never an exit. The episode closes on that ironic, ominous chord, a victory that resolves nothing, a hero who's also a war criminal, and a continent quietly rearranging itself for a far deadlier round. Being X, somewhere, is patient. The atheist, somewhere, is exhausted and unbowed. It's a finale that doesn't conclude so much as reload. The credits roll on, an empire toasting itself, blissfully unaware it's just won its way into a corner. And on the eastern horizon, the war is already learning to walk. Here's a confession before we start, okay? When a war story opens decades after the war, an old man in a quiet room, a journalist recorder running, the smell of dust and hindsight, I normally lean all the way in. The movie does exactly that. It's years after the Great Catastrophe, and a reporter has come to a small church somewhere in the Commonwealth to interview a frail, white-haired clergyman. The priest, it turns out, is Adelheid von Schugel, the same gloriously deranged engineer who once strapped Tanya into the Type 95 and called the resulting screaming data. He's traded the lab coat for vestments now, and when he's asked how the mightiest nation on the continent managed to destroy itself, Schugel smiles the serene smile of a true believer and tells the truth as he sees it. The Empire didn't fall because the world hated it, it fell because the world feared it, and because God, in his wisdom, willed it so. Then he spreads his arms and points in spirit at the one small person he insists was the reason for all of it. Cut to the past. You already know exactly who he means. We rejoin Tanya in 1926, and the war has spread outward exactly the way the series threatened it would. The 203rd is sweating it out in the southern desert against the latest stubborn remnants of the Republic that fled into exile. After a shaky start, they do what they always do. Flatten the enemy headquarters, complete the objective, add another tidy line to the ledger. Tanya, ever the optimist about her own retirement, announces that the boys have earned a trip home and a long rest. The universe, as ever, has read her personnel file and just laughs at her. Because the second they're back, von Ruhrgen hands her fresh orders. Forget the past, go east. Quietly observe what the Rushi Federation is up to along the Imperial border. The Federation is the show's Soviet Union, communism rendered in full grim regalia, and what the 203rd finds out there isn't subtle artillery stacked to the horizon, a war machine winding itself up for a punch. Then the question becomes academic, because the Federation simply declares war first. Tanya, refusing on principle to be the one who gets hit, erases the border encampment with the cold thoroughness that's her entire personality. And just like that, the Eastern Front is open. The biggest war yet has begun, and the least patriotic soldier on the continent is, naturally, standing right at the mouth of it. What follows is the franchise flexing every muscle it owns. Tanya, having read the Federation's pitiful air defenses, makes a pitch so brazen it borders on stand-up. Their skies are so undefended, she argues, you could practically set a civilian puddle jumper down in the enemy capital's central square and just stroll off for a coffee. The reason is pure savage history rhyme. The Federation has shipped off its own mages to internment camps in a fit of paranoid self-cannibalism, leaving the heavens wide open for precisely the kind of strike Tanya wants to make. Command signs off. And so the Empire stages one of the most audacious set pieces in the entire saga, a propaganda raid over the enemy capital. The Imperial Battalion belting out the national anthem at altitude while a camera rolls. A flex so swaggering and so unhinged, it would be hilarious if it weren't also a war crime with a soundtrack. It's here we get our first proper look at the other half of the film's equation. Watching that broadcast and seething is a Federation cabinet official named Loria, a secret police school modelled with zero subtlety on history's very worst, a man whose interest in Tanya the moment he lays eyes on her is so instantly, skin-crawlingly wrong that the movie barely has to lift a finger to make you want him gone. And somewhere in the multinational volunteer ranks flying for the Federation's defense is a young woman who's waited the entire runtime of the TV series just to exist on screen. Mary Sue. I have to stop on the name because the show absolutely wants me to. Her name is Mary Sue. She is, by deliberate design, a literal Mary Sue. Idealistic to the point of self-parody, righteous, impossibly gifted, the earnest golden-hearted heroine who seems to have wandered in from a completely different and far more wholesome anime. Tanya is a cynical reincarnated salaryman who treats human life as a spreadsheet to be balanced. Mary is a grieving daughter who believes in good and evil and is willing to die for the difference. The pettiest god in any heaven spent an entire season building Tanya, the one enemy guaranteed to crawl under his skin. His masterstroke was making her everything Tanya holds in contempt sincere. Mary's reason for being here is the seed planted all the way back at the ford. She's the daughter of Colonel Anson Sue, the husband and father Tanya bayoneted and dropped into the sea without a flicker of feeling. She signed on with the foreign volunteers for one reason that has nothing to do with ideology and everything to do with a grave. She wants the devil of the Rhine, and being X, never one to leave a tool unsharpened, has poured power into her grief the same way he once poured it into her father, which means the girl coming for Tanya isn't merely motivated, she's loaded. Their first match is a mismatch, and the movie's honest about it. Mary is raw, untested, running on fury where she ought to have training. When she hurls herself at the 203rd, she gets a brutal lesson in the chasm between conviction and competence. Tanya handles her without much trouble, but something snags. She feels it the way you feel a draft from a door you were sure was shut. The unmistakable fingerprints of being X all over this child's power. The realization lands like a stone in her gut. This isn't a soldier she can simply outshoot and forget. This is the next move in the cosmic chess match she never agreed to play, and it's wearing the face of a teenager who wants her dead. The cost of Mary's recklessness, meanwhile, falls on everyone around her. The green volunteer pilots she flies with, led by an officer named Drake, who keeps trying and failing to rein her in, get dragged into a fight they weren't ready for and pay for it in blood. It's the first hint of the film's hard thesis. Righteousness without discipline saves no one. It just gets your friends killed beside you. From there, the war funnels off towards Tegenhof. Imperial divisions, the 3rd and the 22nd are encircled at the frozen railway hub, and the 203rd is flung into the crack the siege opens. Tanya, the eternal pragmatist, notes with grim satisfaction that holding the town would hand the Empire the rail lines running straight into the Federation's heart, so she throws herself into the defense with her usual ruthless competence. And it works. At first, the besieged troops get their breathing room, which is of course exactly when Laurier enters the picture again. Learning that the object of his obsession is dug in at Tegenhof, he makes the call that defines the entire Eastern War. Throw bodies at the problem. Not tactics, not finesse, sheer, bottomless, expendable manpower. Wave after wave of Federation soldiers fed into the grinder until something finally gives. It's the single most chilling idea in the movie precisely because there's no magical melodrama in it. It's a real doctrine, history's actual arithmetic of human life as ammunition, and the animation makes you feel the full horror of a frontline that simply won't stop advancing because the men behind it have been priced below the ground they're dying for. Into that nightmare flies the 42nd, a miraculously patched up Mary among them, burning hotter than ever. The Federation launches everything it has. A bomber run shielded by a swarm of fighters aimed at scrubbing Tegenhof off the map entirely. The 203rd does what it was forged to do, carving the bombers out of the sky with the cold, mechanical efficiency that is the unit's signature. But the bombers were never the sequence's heart. The heart is the moment Mary spots, slung across the body of the woman she's hunted across a continent, her dead father's gun. The weapon she once gave him, now reduced to a trophy on the devil's hip. That right there is the trigger. Whatever fragile discipline Mary had left disintegrates on the spot. She breaks formation against direct orders and goes with Tanya alone, and the two of them tear into the longest, rawest, most genuinely frightening duel the franchise has ever put on screen. This is nothing like their first lopsided meeting. Mary's borrowed power has become monstrous, and for long stretches, she doesn't match Tanya. She overwhelms her, battering our unflappable protagonist closer to true fear than we've ever seen her, forcing Tanya to scream prayers she loathes through the Type 95 just to stay in the air. Mid-fight, the awful clarity sets in. Being X handed this child her power exactly for this, to corner Tanya into worship, which means the cosmic tormentor has rigged the duel so he collects no matter who walks away. And then comes the gut punch the film has been building to. Tanya unloads her single strongest spell, everything she has, directly into Mary. And it isn't enough. Mary doesn't die, she just keeps coming. What follows is closer to mutual destruction than any clean victory. Mary, lit up with holy fury, beats Tanya down and very nearly finishes her, gazing up at a statue of an angel in something like rapture even as she does it. In the end, Mary is brought down too, a blinding light tearing out of her as she falls. The 203rd, battered, depleted, out of the road, withdraws rather than presses the kill. Mary survives just barely, recovered by Drake and the 42nd, and left wrecked in a crater, and in her last conscious seconds, her eyes flicker, that terrible being X yellow, as she begs the god who made her for the strength to come back and try again. Nobody walks away whole in this one. Two pawns of the same vindictive deity hammering each other to ruin while he watches, well pleased, and neither of them freed from the board. Here's the cruelest joke though, and it's the one I got backwards the first time I tried to describe this film. After Tegenhoff, Tanya finally pulls it off. She talks strategic headquarters into a 2-month posting in the rear to research combined arms doctrine, and for once, the scheme lands. She actually gets her quiet interval away from the front. There's a glorious little scene of her in a church during the respite, basking in her own survival and lobbing insults at being X with the smug serenity of a woman who thinks she's finally won a round. But she has not. 2 months expire and Hans von Zetor arrives with the punchline. She's to take command of a brand new combined arms battle group, the 8th Kampfgruppe Salamander. No more tidy little mage battalion. Now she gets tanks, infantry, artillery, and a much larger slice of the war to be personally responsible for. Competence remains the cruelest trap in the franchise. The better she performs, the more war they hand her, and the safe rear she finally reaches turns out to be nothing but the staging area for a deeper plunge into the front. So there's no resolution waiting at the end of this, only escalation. The conflict widens, the Mary rivalry calcifies into something permanent and personal, and Tanya finally grasps the true dimensions of the cage she's been pacing this whole time. It's the franchise at full savage power. Funny when it has no business being funny, gorgeous at its very ugliest, and quietly heartbroken beneath all the gunpowder and gallows humour. Being X wanted a believer, what he built instead was a forever war, a grieving girl who will keep getting up no matter how many times she's put down, and an atheist who'd sooner command an army into hell than give him the satisfaction of bending. And honestly, after 2 years and a continent's worth of bodies, I still can't wait to see where it drags them next. Now the part that still feels unreal to say out loud. It's happening. Saga of Tanya the Evil Season 2, Youjo Senki 2 premieres in July 2026, nearly a decade after the original aired. Studio Nut is back, returning writer Kenta Ihara with it, and a new director, Takayuki Yamamoto, takes the chair. Most importantly though, Aoyuki reprises Tanya. You do not recast that performance. Crunchyroll's got it again. Where's it going? East. The movie left Tanya commanding a brand new combined arms battle group and shipping out to the Eastern Front, the long, frozen, grinding war against the Rushi Federation. And that's the whole point, isn't it? Every enemy so far could be outthought. The Federation can't be. It has more bodies than Tanya has bullets. The human wave nightmare Tegenhoff only hinted at. For the first time, the war is bigger than her spreadsheet. Then there's Mary Sue, alive, still carrying her father's grudge and a quarrel with Being X that's about to stop being funny. So expect it to be grimmer. Expect the comedy to be cut and the casualties to cut deeper. The date's real, the team's back, the worst little soldier in anime is going to war. See you in July.